Stanford University.
Morning, everyone. Exciting to be here. Christopher, thank you, and congratulations on Summit 5. Very impressive. I was just chatting with Shirley Everett before we started. I've been with the CIA for 20 years. Was there when we were, how many of you have been up to the Napa Valley to see the CIA Greystone? Had to do a lot of work to open that place 20 years ago, and Shirley came up, did a hard hat tour, and she said, I know you guys are opening here, we need to work together. So CIA and Stanford have been collaborating for about 20 years now on various projects, and we have a new project we're going to mention a little bit further into the day. I want to give a little sense of one of the projects that we're heavily engaged in right now called Menus of Change, and this will give a little window into how we're looking at food system transformation. So that would be Culinary Institute up in the Napa Valley, where we call home. That's our main campus in Hyde Park, New York, just a little sense of that. So just as all of you are sitting here, this is a group of CIA students in our main theater in Hyde Park, New York, listening to Ferran Adria, one of the great chefs in the world. We have a virtual crossroads of world talent coming through our campuses. Just the briefest snapshot on who we are, a non-for-profit college. Started in 1946, 3,000 students in our degree programs, 46,000 alumni, and 4 campuses now in addition to New York and California. We have a campus in Texas and a campus in Singapore. So I want to talk a little bit about the role of chefs and how chefs play into all of this. You know, if you'd gone to a restaurant 30 years ago, you probably didn't know the name of the chef. You were lucky to know the name of the restaurant. Maybe you met somebody. Maybe you were lucky to know the name of the owner. The chef was buried in the kitchen, never came out. There was no sense of that. Of course, that's all changed. Chefs are everywhere on food television, publishing books, owning restaurants, building empires. So when you look at the potential for food system transformation, you look at the food service sector, there's a lot there to look at in terms of the size of the sector and the potential for change. $680 billion in sales, 47% of the share of the US food dollar goes to food service. That goes up and down a little bit. And there's some additional percent beyond that that is chef-driven in the manufacturing and retail sector. All in all, chefs and restaurants exert an enormous influence on national food trends, consumer preferences, values, and then that, in turn, affects everything from agriculture, transportation, everything about our food systems. When we think about leadership, I'm Vice President of Industry Leadership for the college, and so all of our outreach efforts develop around one of these 4 platforms. Very focused on health and wellness, sustainability, and food ethics, but also very involved with world cuisines and cultures, and of course our core mission of professional excellence and innovation. And I want to show you how all of these really weave around our menus of change concept that we've developed. One key takeaway in all this is what I've framed as the unapologetic elevation of deliciousness as a global health and sustainability imperative. If I can leave you with anything today, it's the potential role of culinary in all of these discussions. And I think we were just at this Google meeting we talked about yesterday, had this conversation with a number of people. The public health community, not to pick on anybody in the public health community here, I think is uncomfortable talking about pleasure, is uncomfortable talking about food being delicious. It's okay to talk about food needing to taste good. I don't think that's good enough. Food has to be craveable. If you look at what it's up against, double bacon cheeseburger, fries, Coke, and everything else like that, and we're going to put up something that's merely good against that, we're going to lose every time, right? So we ought to be very comfortable talking about food needing to be craveable, needing to be delicious. And I'd like to see that in public policy statements, in federal statements. So otherwise, we're going to miss out. Unapologetic elevation of culinary strategies. One thing to tell people to eat more fruits and vegetables. It's quite another thing to figure out how to do that so that they go, wow, I want more of that. Food experience design, I would put in that same camp. So menus of change program is a collaboration between the CIA and the Harvard School of Public Health. We have a robust collaboration, a whole portfolio of leadership programs with the School of Public Health at Harvard. And really our strategy on this is within the food and service industry, there's been this steady drip of issues that need to be addressed. Sodium. Everybody runs after sodium. Then everybody runs after trans fat. Then everybody runs after calories. And then there's this sense of, my God, the world is really shifting. Our customers really do want healthier food. We need to look more comprehensively. And so what we've tried to do is to provide a framework. Arlen Wasserman is the head of our Sustainability Business Leadership Council with us here today, and he'll be speaking a little bit later, very instrumental in this initiative, bringing sustainability imperatives, health imperatives, business imperatives together to create a coherent framework vision for the future that looks at issues of risk, that looks at issues of opportunity, so people have a roadmap for the future and can look beyond the current quarter in terms of what they're doing. Looking at, in each case, what is optimal. This is the other thing that is a little bit of an issue with the food service industry. We tend to do things very incrementally. Right? So it's like, oh, you want something healthier? Okay, I'll take one of the pieces of bacon out of the double bacon cheeseburger. You know, and then just moving. So it's a chance to say, what does the end point look like in nutrition? What does the end point look like when we start to hit the wall on water issues worldwide? And what is that going to do to commodity prices for animal protein? And then, you know, if you're running a company with 1,500 units, or you're running a Sodexo, Aramark, or Compass, or food service for the military, or what have you, you can't turn on a dime like a neighborhood restaurant. You've got to have a sense of where all these issues are trending. So this all wraps up into guidance for the future of food. We have two advisory councils, a scientific and technical advisory council. Christopher is on that council, and our Sustainable Business Leadership Council, Eric Montel, is here on that council as well. We publish an annual report now. I'm not going to go into this, but this is, I think, a really useful model for change, for describing how we're engaging the food service industry in a process for change, the kinds of things that make sense to them as opposed to what we may want to impose on the food service industry. Starting with evidence base in nutrition and public health, the environment, integrating those, bringing in the consumer piece, because you may have consumer values and concerns that aren't necessarily evidence-based, but you still have to deal with those because those are your customers. And one of the most interesting pieces of this is that, you know, for the longest time, the mantra of the food service industry, manufacturers and everything else, we're just trying to respond to our customers. And now I think we have a clear sense that we can also lead our customers. So it's a little bit of both, and so this kind of captures that. This is a picture of the cover of our current annual report, menusofchange.org. I encourage you to check it out, download that. And as part of that, we have a dashboard that gives us an annual checkup on where the industry is going on a number of key indicators, 24 principles of healthy, sustainable menu development. And I wanted to just single out one of these, which is focused on largely plant-based cooking. I'll just read part of this. The most effective way to help diners make healthy, sustainable food choices is to shift our collective diets to mostly plant-based foods. In fact, no other single decision in the professional kitchen or the boardrooms of food service companies can compare in terms of the benefits of advancing global environmental sustainability. Now, here comes the strategy piece. From the well-researched Mediterranean diet to the cuisines of Asia and Latin America, traditional food cultures offer a myriad of flavor strategies to support innovation around healthy, delicious, even craveable cooking that rebalances ratios between food from animal and plant sources. Now, this may be intuitive to everybody in the room, but good luck finding this embedded in policy statements in the United States or major public health organizations in terms of strategy, right? This is what we're getting at. This raises two key questions. One is, how do we increase the interest in the foods we should be eating more of? And how do we take the foods we should be eating less of, in this case animal protein, meat, and leverage smaller amounts of those items. And Chef Adam Busby will be doing a great demo on that a little bit later on. So there's a whole variety of culinary strategies that you can start to bring into this equation, starting from, you know, how do we grow our food, farming from flavor, going up through culinary techniques, the use of aromatics, various other kinds of opportunities. A little picture of a spice market in Istanbul here. So just to take one example out of all this, the use of herbs and aromatics. You know, in the US, when you think about reducing meat portions, oftentimes it's that large piece of meat on the plate, and so the message seems to be to people, oh, you want to cut that in half, you want to make that smaller. Actually, what happens in a lot of traditional cultures is they'll take that and add a whole lot of spices and herbs to it, and then mix it with a lot of vegetable matter, and you have this really craveable meal. So it's an entirely different approach. But you can take the same approach to forget about the animal protein, forget about the meat for a minute, just to produce, to fruits and vegetables. So this is something you see all over the world. Roasted vegetables plus the world's spice kitchen. You can look in India, roasted cauliflower roasted with Indian spices. You can look at the roasted carrots with North African spices. You can go to Turkey and you see wood-roasted eggplant. The roasting of tomatoes with Oaxacan spices that go into mole. Spanish peppers roasted with aromatics over. You can look all over the world, and there is this combination of vegetables plus culinary technique plus spices, herbs, aromatics, and you get craveable produce. You know, much more effective than just telling people to eat more fruits and vegetables. I think we all get that. We have to move to the next thing in terms of strategy. Now, this is another critical piece of the puzzle, and we're especially guilty of this in the food service industry, which is we tend to lump everybody into a regular customer or a special need customer. The regular customer, I'm going to do my regular menu, indulgence, over the top, celebratory. Even if you're trying to have an everyday meal, we're still going to load it on for you. It's like, oh, you have a special need, you're a vegetarian, or you have some other gluten-free something or other. We're happy to manage that, but we're going to put that in a special category. And you see how this plays out. Let me just give you an example. Life Kitchen here, not to pick on Life Kitchen. I love those guys. They're doing great job. But if you happen to have been, and I haven't been in the last few months, but when I went maybe 8 months ago to the Life Kitchen here in Palo Alto, they had 2 burgers. One was an Angus burger, 100% beef. The other one was a portobello mushroom burger. That's what we do in our industry. It's like you go into Camp A or you go into Camp B. And we'll do the same thing for appetizers. You want a salad? Great. You want a big plate of fried calamari? Great. Can you get anything in the middle? Hard to do that. So there's an opportunity to rethink that. And here's just an example of this with a steak with mushrooms on top. Everybody gets that. Everybody gets the portobello mushroom burger, which is the one on the right. What happens if you take a different approach, inspired by, let's say in this case, the cuisines of Asia, which will take a very small amount of meat and do a stir fry with a huge amount of green beans or a huge amount of whatever vegetable you could be thinking of. And then on the right, a meatball that is 25% mushrooms or 30% or 40% mushrooms. And you've already taken a huge whack out of the meat in that and given people a fabulous experience. So we went then to, a little bit later on, we're going to be talking about research. We went to UC Davis and we said, this is a hunch that we have. We've cooked it up, we really like it. Can we do some sensory work? So we actually did a formal sensory research study with UC Davis and published the results of this recently. So all over the world, necessity was the mother of invention in traditional kitchens. This guy kind of needs to sell all these by the end of the day, or is he going to be in trouble? You know, and you see this from Asia to Latin America. Plant proteins. You know, you can go through a salad bar and see a tub of tofu that's just cut up and sitting there, or you can look to a place like Vietnam that does fabulous things with tofu, lemongrass, with basil chilies, crusted peanuts. Same thing with legumes, same thing with nuts. So the bottom line, or one of the bottom lines that I would like to leave you with, and this tees up a little bit of our conversation for later this morning about research, is that if you look at these things lining up in terms of the impact of diet and health on chronic disease, and you look at the absolute unsustainability of our reliance on animal protein and trying to feed the future of the planet with 2 to 3 additional billion people, and yet we keep running into this stumbling block of nutrition taste trumps environmental imperatives every time. Maybe not every time, but almost every time. So what I'm suggesting that we need is a new global research focus around the intersection of deliciousness, menu insight, healthy, sustainable, plant-based food choices. There's a big disconnect between chefs' culinary insight and the academic research community on the other hand. Barely talk to each other. And what often happens is the public health community will say, you ought to be eating more fruits and vegetables, less of this, more. And so let's just hand this all over to the chefs. You guys are the creative ones. You'll figure this out, knock yourself out, right? And the chefs are going, so there's just this lack of collaboration, and that's what we're trying to address. We need a broad-based partnership to, I think, move some of these things forward. Just a couple of things to end with. We're very excited. We have a long-running partnership now with Google, and we're in the process of developing a culinary innovation and world flavors lab at the Google Mountain View campus. And this will be a place where we can test all of these things. So basically testing the imperatives that come out of menus of change and saying what happens when you try something on a Google engineer, is he going to like it or not, and get feedback that way. And that will also be a lab that we can plug in other researchers from around the country to test things or to try to replicate things. So we're excited about that. And again, we'll talk a little bit about this later on this morning, but we're then launching a new partnership with Stanford that we're calling our Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, with a group of premier universities that are really interested in food system transformation and want to make that connection between academics and food service on campus. So more on that a little bit later in the morning. So that's it. Excited to be here. Thank you very much.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.